Welcome to our SUSECON Digital talk about setting up, securing and supporting your SAP environments with SUSE Manager. I am Joachim Werner, Senior Product Manager at SUSE, and today I have with me Kleber from SUSE Sistemas in Brazil, who will give you a few real-life examples from his consulting work. So first I'm going to set the stage, talk a bit about how SUSE and SAP go back a very long time and with a great partnership. Then I'll talk about SUSE Manager and SUSE Linux Enterprise Server for SAP applications. I'll show you how we can use SUSE Manager for deploying for SAP applications, and then Kleber comes in with his real-life examples. Finally, I will wrap up with some examples for the new monitoring stack for SAP and especially SAP HANA environments, and what the future will bring in SUSE Manager in 4.1 in the latest release that we are releasing later this year. So running business critical SAP applications has always been a critical workload on top of SUSE, as you can see in this architecture slide. Today we are going to talk mainly about the OS part, the operating system, SUSE Linux Enterprise Server for SAP applications, and also the infrastructure and lifecycle management provided by SUSE Manager. But as you can see, there are many more boxes, and our relationship with SAP plays a role in all of those. We are also going to we are going to talk a bit about using this stack in the public cloud. So, very briefly, what are our goals? We want to make sure that you can run a better SAP infrastructure. We want to simplify the setup and the maintenance and the operation of such a stack with easy-to-use tools. We want to reduce the time and effort to keep business-critical applications available and secure. We want to help you modernize your application stack. For example, deploying SAP HANA in the public cloud, deploying, managing, and scaling those modern SAP application delivery infrastructures so you can quickly adapt to your business requirements. And of course, we want to accelerate. We want to make sure that you can deliver your SAP services faster, be more agile, more efficient, and with less risk, both on-premise and in the cloud. As I've mentioned before, SUSE and SAP are looking back on a partnership that's almost 20 years old now. We have been the front runner for many technologies. I won't go into all the details here. And at the moment, SUSE Linux Enterprise Server is the strategic OS for many of the SAP products, as you can see in this long list. We have also started a collaboration on our Cloud Foundry work with SUSE Container Application Platform. This is just a short list of reference stories that are up on the SUSE website, and there are more to come. Every month, basically, we are adding a new one. Those are all customers who are using SUSE Manager and for SAP applications together for their company success. Just to set the stage, what we are aiming at is new customers to SUSE who may not have had any Linux experience before, for example, because they've been running their SAP stack on another operating system, and they are now moving over to Linux space because of their move to SAP HANA. Those SAP HANA boxes may be the first SAP on Linux and maybe the first SUSE Linux they've ever seen. And yeah, of course, they want to make sure that everything is staged before it goes into production, and they want to make sure that with as little effort as possible, they can follow the SAP guidelines, the so-called SUP nodes. This is where SUSE Manager comes into the picture. SUSE Manager is our best-in-class open source infrastructure management solution. It helps you optimize operations while reducing cost, reduce complexity, and regain control of your IT assets, and ensure compliance with internal security policies and external regulations. SUSE Manager 4 which was released about a year ago, is addressing many of those topics with the SAP workloads in mind. We have added much easier content lifecycle management that was built after the lifecycle management environments that SAP users are so familiar with. We have added monitoring specifically with probes for example, SAP HANA workloads, and you'll see that in a minute. We have added setup formulas, so-called SALT formulas for SAP. And again, that's something that we will show in practice with a few extra formulas from the work of SUSE in Brazil. And we also have added virtual machine management, which will become available for SAP HANA environments with the next release, with the 4.1 release later this year. And finally, SUSE Manager 4, just like for SAP applications, is based on the same SUSE Linux Enterprise 15 base product and can be installed with the same installer. So just very briefly, how does the content lifecycle management look like? You can create your staging areas. This is just a very common example, development, QA, production, but you can have 4 staging areas or just 1. This is very easy to configure. You can create a new content lifecycle project. You would do that for a set of environments that are similar, let's say your /SAP environments or your web servers. There are wizards that make it really easy to pick the right channels you want to make part of this lifecycle environment. So those are the code channels, the repositories coming from SUSE. Then you can create those different staging areas and steps like development, QA, production. When you test something in production, when you test something in development, once it's all working as planned, you can then promote this environment to the next stage, do your QA, and then finally promote it to production. Yeah, I've mentioned that SUSE Linux Enterprise Server and SUSE Manager are all based on the same installation media now. So when you look at typical YAS installation workflow, basically from that same screen you can pick SUSE Linux Enterprise Server for SAP applications, a normal / or SUSE Manager Server, SUSE Manager Proxy, or even the retail option. So talking about the formulas that we use for setting up these environments, there are 2 different basic building blocks, one for SAP HANA and one for setting up HA clusters. And you can use them together to set up highly available SAP clusters. 2 main tools are used for that. So when we are talking about cloud deployments, we are using a tool called Terraform. Terraform is a tool for building, changing, and versioning infrastructure safely and efficiently in a GitOps style workflow, where you basically use a template, change the template, reapply, and you can change your environment. You can manage existing popular service providers like Cloud, libvirt, and many others. Terraform can manage low-level and high-level components such as instances, storage, networking, DNS, and so on. Another tool we are using together with Terraform, and this is for both the cloud provisioning and also for provisioning on bare metal or virtual machines, is SALT. SALT is a very strong configuration management system capable of maintaining remote nodes in defined states. It is a distributed remote execution system used to execute commands and query data on remote nodes, and it has extensive lists of existing standard states and formulas for the many different purposes. As I said, we have added specific so-called SALT formulas for setting up your /SAP, your HA clusters, and also all the monitoring components. Combining both, we deliver a stack that has the engineering goal of improved user experience for our SAP customers, the customers we love. Fast and secure to deploy your SAP sub-clusters in minutes or maximum hours instead of days with idempotent states. So you can run this again. If something failed, you can just run it again, and this next time it will fix all the stages that didn't work. It's not a serial process. It's customizable and modular building blocks that make it easier for your consulting teams to adjust these to your needs. and it can be integrated on existing solutions like SUSE Manager or existing Terraform and Salt deployments. This is the high-level architecture. So on-premise, we are using a combination of SUSE Manager and YAST and AutoYAST for setting up the bare metal machines. In the cloud, we are using Terraform. And then on top of that, we have the modular salt states. And as a base, the so-called SAP tools, which are low-level tools that we are using across the whole SLES4 SAP stack for making those maintenance and setup tasks easier. And then finally, you can manage this whole thing with SUSE Manager. And we are also looking into plans for embedding those basic states into the YAST installer for one-offs with a guided workflow. Yeah, for many more details on this Terraform deployment in the public cloud, please watch the tutorial 1092, Bootstrapping SLES4 SAP HANA and NetWeaver, which has all the details that we can't cover in this shorter talk. Our future plans for this, and this is of course subject to change at any time, we want to enable more SAP application scenarios like HANA Scale-Out, like SAP Data Hub, and more. We want to include integration tests so you can actually certify your cluster once you've set it up and make sure that everything has worked as planned. And new integrations, for example, adding SUSE Enterprise Storage and also CASP. Yeah, now I'm going to hand over to Clever for some of his real-life examples.
Okay, thank you, Joy. On the slides, I will pass over some of challenges that we face in some projects. The idea here is show how we can use SUSE Manager to make sysadmin's life easier. We will show how we can use SUSE Manager to standardize some server operations, software installations, installation monitoring tools, backup tools, and some formulas that we have created to make sysadmin's life easier and make some tasks that sometimes are tricky to make it easier through SUSE Manager. So in the next slide, you have the idea that SUSE Manager 4 bring to us. That was the idea of using state channels. Use SUSE Manager state channels feature on SUSE Manager UI. You can create a set of salt states to make some standardizations on those servers easier. The idea here is that you can make all your SAP servers have the same base softwares. You can create states on state channels that could install all those softwares and guarantee that all your systems has the same set of softwares and also the same set of configuration in place. The idea is make through the SUSE Manager UI the selection of servers and a selection of channels to make all the standard set of features available on your SAP servers. We have this sample where we create a file, but the idea here was to make the installation of all the base software that you need in your servers, all monitoring software that you need to make monitoring of SAP infrastructure up, all the configurations that you need to be in place for your servers, and even the backup softwares that you need installed on your servers. To make to extend those features, sometimes admins need to provide some piece of information to those states to make the settings fits what the company are using. So SUSE Manager has a features called SUSE Manager Formula with Form that allows you to use a set of salt states and create some forms on SUSE Manager to allow sysadmins to fill out many of the features or parameters that you need to set on your states, and you have the features of forms to make it easier for sysadmin include those informations directly on SUSE Manager. You have a standard place where you can put your states, and you have some standard place where you can use to put your forms data, and all those informations that are filled in the forms are available directly on your SUSE Manager server in the directory SRV SUSE Manager formula data pillar. So the idea was what you need to create your formula in SUSE Manager. You need to follow some steps. That is, create a metadata YAML file that you describe the formula and all the arrangement of group information inside SUSE Manager. You have to create a form.yaml file. That is the file that you have all the information related, the fields that need to be filled in SUSE Manager, all the validation dependence of data in group inside the SUSE Manager forms. And you have to write all the states that you need to use those informations filled in the form in YAML and to be applied in the systems. We will start with an example that is available on SUSE Manager. That is, you can use to select locate information. You have in your left side the data filled in the form YAML file, where you create the fields like time zone, defining a group of information. You have a field for name that receive a list of time zones, and you have some other fields like hardware clock set to UTC, and where you select the type of those information like Boolean, you select the full values, and on your right side you see the screen that is rendered in SUSE Manager, where the sysadmin select the fields and select the values that he wants for these fields. The idea here is that when you are working with SUSE Manager forms, you can apply those formulas to computers or directly to a group of computers. So depends on the type of formula that you are using, you can apply a configuration to a group of servers to make life easier. We created some custom formulas to make some examples in activities from sysadmin daily tasks easier, like this one, where we create a formula to make Active Directory integration. The idea here was create a form in SUSE Manager that you allow sysadmin select what he wants to check related to Active Directory integration, the fields that are needed for this, like FKDN, server, IP address, and username and password. And after filling those informations, this information is right on SUSE Manager as a pillar. And on the next slide, you have the idea behind this formula. You have used and documentation available on SUSE website that note all the points that you need to follow to make this integration really work using SSSD. And we created all those steps using the one feature available in South related to include. You create the main state, include those states with all the relations between them. And on the next slide, you have an excerpt from this code where we validated all those informations that were filled on the forms. We make it works for SUSE 12 and 15. and you make all changes on those servers to make it integrate to Active Directory. This is only an example about how you can use SUSE Manager formulas forms to make sysadmin life easier. The idea was get activities that sysadmins needed every day and make that easier so that even people with no knowledge on Linux could make some fingers using those features available on SUSE Manager. We have shared all those information on GitHub so the community can take an idea about what you have used. We added here some other examples, like how you can use some softwares, antivirus software and security software to make the installation of those software easier. The idea was to create formulas with the minimum information that is needed for the configuration of the software, make it available on SUSE Manager, and sysadmin select those servers where he wants to install the software, provide the parameters specific for each server, and apply those formula on those servers. When we apply the high state, the software installed and configured as was selected on SUSE Manager. So the sysadmin don't need to have a big understand about how Linux works. He don't need to put your hands on console, and after that, all the configuration of the software is done, and this feature is reproducible. Another salt formula that we have created was related to configuration of sudoers file so that you can create group of commands, group of alias, group of users, and you link all those together to populate the sudoers files at the end. The idea on all those formulas was to make daily activities reproducible and easier for sysadmins. Behind of this, SUSE provides some SUMA formulas for SAP HANA. This is available in a specific RPM file, SAP HANA Bootstrap formula. With those formula, it's make easier this installation of standalone SAP HANA. It make also life easier with some system application and custom optimized scenarios with high availability. And all those packages are available directly from SUSE. So in the right side, you have the formula available that we can view all the informations related to SAP HANA installations. And also there's some work being done related to SAP applications. You have states available on SUSE GitHub portal, but you still don't have formulas available to be added to SUSE Manager. But I think something that is on the hold. Okay, summarize the idea with those use cases show that SUSE Manager could be used to make sysadmin life easier so that you can reproduce many of the activities you do daily and reproducing that using formulas. You create a set of states that will apply all your custom chains on your servers. You can also use SUSE Manager formulas to install some SAP HANA, and also probably in the future you have some formulas also for SAP applications. All these examples formulas that you have used, you make it available publicly so anyone can use, can trust, and can try.
Thank you. And now I'm very briefly going to cover the monitoring side of this Less for SAP story. which consists of SUSE Manager, Prometheus as the main monitoring component, and Grafana for the dashboards. This SAP HANA monitoring project is also, of course, all open source. We are using Prometheus for collecting the data, Grafana for the dashboards, and it's very pluggable. It will include HANA monitoring, cluster monitoring, OS monitoring, and of course you can add your own probes, so-called Prometheus exporters at any time. The basic architecture overview looks like this. SUSE Manager, sometimes an extra server for the Grafana as well, and then the Prometheus node. You should not run that on SUSE Manager because you will also want to monitor SUSE Manager itself, and you should never run the monitoring server on the same box. And then you can monitor not just one SAP HANA, but of course as many clusters as you want, and both in public cloud and private cloud settings. For public cloud, some network setups have to be looked at, but there are more detailed talks on that I'm listing in the backups. So this is an example for a multi-cluster dashboard. This is a SAP HANA details dashboard. And this is one for the SAP HANA system replication. Yeah, we can also handle alerts. This is just a very brief picture of how this works. There are actually two ways of doing that. You can use Grafana alerts and Prometheus alerts for actually sending out emails or a chat node on a Slack channel, for example, or activating a webhook. The alert manager for Prometheus is what you want to do here. Next steps are also adding NetWeaver monitoring and some nice dashboards for that. And then we are also looking into logging, log aggregation with Loki or Elastic. Yeah, very briefly, how does the virtualization management that we have added to SUSE Manager fit into this picture? We are in the process, or have already done so, of certifying a lot of the SAP scenarios as virtual machines on KVM. This is just an overview of where we are with this. The plan for SUSE Manager 4.1 is to make sure that we have a fully certified stack for HANA virtualized. This is already possible for non-production environments, but the plan is to make sure that you can run it fully in production and get decent performance. In SUSE Manager 4.1, which is going to launch in July 2019, we are also adding the necessary UI changes to the SUSE Manager virtualization stack. A few other things that you can expect in 4.1. First of all, a lot of the UI and UX experience is improved. Things that used to be a manual task are automated. For example, any database schema updates just happen in the background when you do an update. So much easier to install, much easier to operate because we are leaving steps out. One thing that's particularly important in public cloud is onboarding of clients with an SSH key, so passwordless. And there will be quick start guides for using SUSE Manager in the public cloud for the SAP scenario specifically. And the biggest change really in Manager 4.1 is that we are for the first time adding cluster awareness. So there will be a cluster paradigm in SUSE Manager. We are starting with making sure you can add container as a service platform clusters and add remove nodes, update those clusters, and we will then add clusters for SUSE Linux Enterprise Storage and so on. In the traditional patch automation space, we are finally adding a feature that a lot of our customers have been looking forward to. We can define patch windows. This will be done in a very clever way. So basically you can create a calendar in any calendar tool you want to use and import the calendar. And we also automate a regular patching like an salt high state every couple of days or so. Beyond 4.1, cluster awareness, as I said, is extended for enterprise storage. for SAP HA, based on the work that we've done and that we've just presented in this talk. We are looking into a multi-stage architecture with a so-called SUSE Manager Hub that can combine data from many SUSE Manager servers. We will have Terraform integrated directly into SUSE Manager, so we can use these things you just saw about setting up for SAP in the public cloud from SUSE Manager's UI and API. And at some point, most likely version 5.0, we are also going to containerize SUSE Manager itself so it can run on top of a Kubernetes cluster. So remember, SUSE Manager 4 is the perfect match for your SUSE-based SAP landscape from the data center to the cloud. You can get an evaluation key now. It has been extended as a summer promotion to 120 days. So you can get that on the SUSECON website. There are many more related presentations at SUSECON Digital, as you can see here. In particular, the first one, bootstrapping for SAP HANA and NetWeaver clusters with Terraform and Salt on public clouds. Thank you for your interest, and make sure that you also watch some of those other talks.
Thank you.